Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
We'll give ourselves 2 more minutes before we jump on in. Thank you for coming to join this journey with us. This is our 4th of 4 seminars in this phase of the work. And so we're excited to see how it will transform our lives, our community. And we look forward to all of the next steps. So we'll continue giving people 60 more seconds. And then if it's all right with everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we've been looking forward to this. We've done a lot of prep work for this one. This session will not be like the other sessions. While we love our breakout rooms and love those safe spaces, we've reserved this session for our group-wide, webinar-wide group conversation that will be facilitated, and I will be the timekeeper, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with showing my screen if I can.
Oh, hold on 1 second, Allison. I'm going to make you a co-host.
Make me the co-host. Thank you, Carolyn. Excellent. All righty.
Hold on 1 second.
Go. Switch this on over to slideshow. We're going to do it from the beginning. All right. I just hit 6 o'clock. You guys see 6 o'clock? Time to get started.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's roll. This is the 4th of 4 webinars that the Women's Coalition has very delicately put together since November, and we appreciate the Planning Committee for your efforts. We'll hear from the Planning Committee a little bit later, but in the meantime, let's get right into it. So my name is Allyson Reaves. If I haven't met you yet, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been pretty active here on St. Croix and in the territory for the past 4, maybe 5 years, doing a lot of work with about 30 nonprofits here on the island. Primarily, I do a lot of work with the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development, and we're a very close partner with the Women's Coalition, so this is a natural extension of that work. While I continued chatting, Deborah, are you able to help us put up our poll?
Yes.
And for the first time, we're conducting a poll, and let me say this, we are aiming to get to the good data. So it'll take you a few minutes to conduct your poll. I think everyone should be able to see it in front of you. What we're aiming to assess is how we sort of self-identify as people who live in, on, and are from the Virgin Islands. We're aiming to collect a little bit of data about, how we self-identify and the spaces that we're comfortable in. Now, because this poll is the way that it is, we had to give our responses some clearer terms. So, as I look at this survey, and I hope you're looking at it too, I'll read it out loud as you read it to yourself regarding ethnicity, which best describes how you self-identify. I'm going to select mine. I hope you all will select yours. Okay. As we go on to number 2, and I want to be super duper clear, we're aiming to get the best data possible, so we had to word it in a particular way. So for those of you who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, would you consider yourself any of the following? And of course, we have a number of different options. I believe this is multiple choice. And we wanted to identify the perceptions of people of color. So if you happen to be white, please select the answer, I am a white person. This is not to disengage you in any way because you have another question. What we wanted to do is make sure we're isolating specific groups so we can get to the purest data possible. For number 3, for those who are white, would you consider yourself any of the following? And we have those same responses so that you too can answer. If you are not white, please mark, I am a person of color. Okay? The same thing for number 4. We tried to give clear indicators so that we could assess the best data among all of the cultural groups that are represented on the phone. So if you're a person of color, there are some answers for you. If you're a white person, there are some answers for you. This conversation is about dismantling racism, so we got to be comfortable talking about it, and we have to be comfortable with collecting data about it. So I see some of our numbers coming in. I'm dealing with a lot of Afro-Caribbeans. Okay, a lot of activists. We see some numbers coming in. We're going to continue talking through it until we have 100% of people who have voted. I think 7 of the 49 people on this call have placed their answers so far. So let me give you a moment to walk through the poll. And then Clemma, I'm going to turn it over to you for your welcome. And then we're going to see some of the responses from the poll. So let's give everybody maybe 60 seconds to sort of move through this. It looks like we've got 32% of people who are voting. Again, 100% participation is what we're aiming to get to.
I'm pressing submit, but it ain't going. What happened?
Did you miss an answer? You must answer all of the questions.
I'm going back, I think I did.
Yep, so if you can just go back and make sure you've selected something.
I know there's some people that are having trouble seeing it as well. Is there any thing that we could tell them?
Let's see. I'm not sure that they're having trouble seeing it on their screen. Is that the case? I don't know.
Yeah.
I see one person said they couldn't see it. Is there anyone else who cannot see it?
In the chat, please note if you can't see the poll. And then maybe, we can connect with you to see if we can somehow make it visible.
Levon say I don't have the poll. Having trouble advancing mine, says somebody.
Oh,
Okay.
Mary found it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. What
And
you wanna do-
advancing it is the slide on the side. There's a
Yes,
little
you have
slide.
to scroll with
Scroll
the
down.
all the way to the
Bottom.
left.
Right.
You're right facing.
Yes.
There
And
should be a
so
little gray bar that you can scroll up and down. And if you click on poll at the bottom of the screen, you should see it. Thank you, Deanna.
Yep. We're all gaining our Zoom intel here.
Yeah.
Learning by doing. All right, looks like we're at 73% who have voted. We got 42 out of 57. We're trying to get to 100%. So if you're still having trouble, just note it in the chat and we'll see if our community can come up with some instructions and some guidance. All right, while we wait for the remaining 25% of folks to make their choices, Clemma, I'm going to pivot to you to give your welcome if I can.
Okay. Good evening and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for participating in our 4th forum, number 4. Thank you. Our 4th forum. And I would also like to say thank you for coming to this forum during Black History Month. This is Black History Month. The theme is Black families, representation, identity, and diversity. Last month, we did it on Martin Luther King's birthday, and this month we were fortunate enough to do it during Black History Month. Well, here we are. The time is now to discuss, digest, dismantle racism in the United States Virgin Islands, session 4, the last of our 4 sessions. This is a call to unify, community action, moving forward, and what's going to be our next steps. So this is where the work really begins. So get ready. Everyone who has completed this session and the previous 3 will get a certificate from the Women's Coalition virtually. It's a beautiful certificate that said you completed the 4 sessions. So as long as you completed it, you will get your beautiful certificate, as well as a special thank you for us for participating in the 4 sessions. I want to do a special thank you to the committee that I'm a part of. This committee has really been working hard, trust me, really hard. I would like to thank Lisa Moorhead, who's the board member, Debbie Benjamin, who's our communications specialist, Carolyn Forno, the assistant director. This has been our committee, y'all wave so they'll know who you are. all of the work and what has taken place has been this small group of women, believe it or not, that has been committed to us moving forward. Thank you, ladies. I mean, we couldn't do it without each other. It took all of us to put this together, and it has not been an easy task. It looked good on the day of, but it's a lot of background work to go in. And so, ladies, from my heart, thank you all for all you've done over and beyond your regular work duties. Now I want to go into a very special thank you to Allyson.
No.
Allyson has been with us for all 4 sessions. She has moderated. She has kept us on task. She's tightened us up where we left off. She's brought us in. And she's just really been a really wonderful person to work with. I just have a lot of respect and admiration for you, Allyson. Thank you for helping us do all this and putting it together. Really, you're a part of the committee, but I wanted to sing you out because you don't get, you know, I wanted the group to know how special it's been to have you and you supporting us for this event. I mean, y'all, she comes to all of the meetings. She keeps it together. So those that can hear me, you can give her a little, please, like a thank you, a special thank you or whatever, because I mean, it meant a lot that she was able. Allyson, thank you so much on behalf of the Women's Coalition. Really, thank you for helping us get through this. I also want to thank, we've been to the media like crazy, thanks to Miss Deborah Benjamin. I don't think we've ever been on so many shows and radio and TV as we have in these last 4 months, and Debbie has set it all up. So I want to thank all the media who has let us come on their show and talk about anti-racism. They've been open, their arms have been open, and we've been all over the community talking about it. And we want to give a very special thank you to Ernest Gilbert, who is live streaming for us through VI Consortium. From the very beginning, when Ms. Benjamin spoke to him, he had agreed to be a partner, and he has participated throughout all the sessions. Most of all, I want to thank everybody that's present today, everybody that comes to these sessions, everybody that speak up, those that don't speak up, everybody who has been a part from day one to the day. I want you to know how much it means to this agency, but most importantly, how much it means to this community. It means that you have some kind of sight, some kind of faith, some kind of hope that you like to see a difference in the Virgin Islands. And guess what? We can have all the committee meetings and do all the work we wanted to, but we couldn't do it without you. So again, on behalf of the Women's Coalition, I'd like to thank everybody that's either, whether you have a photograph up, you're on the call, whether you're listening, whether you participate, on behalf of the Women's Coalition, thank you. But I want to leave you with something to think about through all the session. This is the beginning, not the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Clemma, and a rousing applause for you and your vision to bring this all together. So are we ready to see our results?
Mm-hmm.
Ready to see where we've landed? Let me see, can everyone see in front of them the results? Thumbs up if you can see it, please. Okay, I'm gonna walk through it slowly so that we can sort of digest it. And our guest contributors, Peter and Diana, will be able to really, speak to some of these findings in a lot of their contributions this evening. So let's walk through the first question. When we think about who's in this work, this is how people self-identify. And there's this, let me back up. There's no right answer, right? Because how we self-identify is reflective of our culture, our heritage, and how our families kind of raised us. It's interesting to see that 32% of people on this call self-identify as African-American. Just below that, 24% self-identify as Afro-Caribbean, and just underneath of that, 22% identify as white. So we'll keep that just so in mind as we continue this great work. For those who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, we take a look to see what they consider themselves. 46, almost half of those who are people of color consider themselves a community member. 32% consider themselves anti-racist. Taking a look here, 6% of us consider ourselves experts in racism, culture, history, politics, and education. We'll be calling on you soon. let you digest that for just a moment. For those who are white, and let me make sure we can expand this to see as much as we can. We'll see that 20% consider themselves a community member. Just behind that, 18% consider themselves anti-racists. 10% consider themselves allies. Okay? It's important to know who's in the room as we have these conversations. How comfortable are you discussing racism? 42%, a good number of those who are people of color, are very comfortable. We take a look at those who are white, and most of them are mostly comfortable. Okay? Glad to see that there were no responses around not being comfortable as a white person, right? And as a person of color, I am not very comfortable. So one person responded, around that particular answer. So what we want to do is really digest for ourselves the readiness of our group, right? How many participants do we have? We have 61 people on the call. How many are willing to walk through this work? Taking a look at racial trauma. The majority, 26% of people of color, responded that they've never experienced racial trauma. Behind that, 14% identified that they've experienced trauma in the past 2 years. For those who self-identified as white, 10% of you have never experienced racial trauma. 6% have experienced it in the past 6 months. Okay. All right, question number 6. Folks who are willing to volunteer for this next phase of work in dismantling racism, thank you to the 50% of people of color who responded yes. For the 22% of people of color who responded maybe, thank you. For those who are white and responded yes, thank you. For those who are white and responded maybe, thank you. For those who responded no, thank you for answering in that way. And thank you for being a part of this conversation. For number 7, for those who are people of color, it would be helpful. 54% of you think it would be helpful to have separate, smaller group discussions with others of your same racial identity. For those who are white, 6% said yes, 8% said maybe. And so for the planning committee, this is some incredible data that we can use in our future planning. If you have any comments or questions, please do feel free to place them in the chat. For now, I'm going to stop sharing the results and I'm going to pivot to our speakers. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to read a little bit about them. Hold on one second. Let me get my view correct. And then I'll share the presentation that I had going up. Okay. Thank you for your understanding, everybody. So, and I'll offer just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll hear from our contributing guests, Deanna and Peter. And then we're going to go into some group-wide conversations. So no breakout rooms this session, rather group-wide conversations. And in order to facilitate a conversation with 60 or some odd people, I'll ask you to inbox me by chat so that I'll know to sort of point to you for the next comment, reflection, thought, or idea. That's how we kind of want to order our conversations so that we don't have folks kind of talking a bit over each other. So if that's all right with you, I'll go ahead and read off some of the backgrounds of our contributing guests. So let's get started. Deanna James is president of the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and she has served in that role since 2015. She's held a number of executive level positions at the foundation during her 18-year tenure, and now she oversees general operations, grant making, and programming development. She's currently spearheading some of the territory's most innovative and holistic initiatives in its 30-year history, including a first-of-its-kind nonprofit consortium, which has adjoined 30 local social impact organizations around a collaborative and a progressive vision of equitable, community-rooted social change. In fulfilling SCF's core philanthropic mission of encouraging greater philanthropic activity into and within the U.S. Virgin Islands, Deanna has been advocating for the field of philanthropy to begin to demonstrate greater courage and aptitude for radical systems change from within, in the same way it seeks to invest in and inspire external systems change. A native of the Virgin Islands, Deanna holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Lehigh University, as well as a Master of Arts degree from American University in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Deanna, for joining us. Peter Tewinkle is the pastor of St. Croix Reformed Church in Estate Lorraine. He and his family have lived on St. Croix since 2017. Peter has spent part of his time here learning about the harm his Dutch Reformed ancestors have done and searching for ways to bring healing and justice. There's a lot of truth in what I just said, you guys. Thank you for Peter. Thank you to Peter for including that. He is part of a local gathering of Coming to the Table, a national organization focused on racial justice. Peter is passionate about restorative justice, conflict transformation, and community organizing. He is pursuing a doctoral degree in strategic leadership with an emphasis on liberation, decolonization, and justice. Peter believes that we have the power to make change if we will just show up for one another and speak out together. Peter, welcome. Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started. And let's see if I can make sure that we're able to view our speakers when they speak. Let's get started with Deanna. We've got the questions here and we'll walk through them one by one. Deanna, we'll get started with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
So actually, this is really interesting. We sat and we did our prep for this call, and one of the things that was really interesting is that question I thought was like, oh, I'm not even going to answer that question. Everybody knows who I am. But in like really sifting through it, it was really interesting that I was able to unveil an interesting backstory of myself that I had not really unpacked before. So just, I consider myself to be every woman. I am a native Virgin Islander. My maternal family are ancestral Virgin Islanders, and my paternal family is from the Netherlands Antilles. And so I know that in the past we've had these conversations about internalized racism and some of the issues that folks experienced when they came to St. Croix. And I felt like I had all of those experiences in my story. My father obviously came here to St. Croix to help build the refinery. He was one of the first group of people that came from other islands to help with the start of the refinery. My mom was originally from St. Thomas, but had left and had spent 13 years in Philadelphia. So when she came to St. Croix, she was a Yankee, and she raised us as Yankees, and we were terrorized in school because of how we spoke, and never felt the ability to tell our story, which is that we were not allowed to speak Crucian in our house. Both my mom and my father forbade us from doing that. And so we had this interesting, upbringing, and at the same time, our education here was as interesting, and I think had such an incredible impact on where I ended up. So I've been to just about every school on St. Croix. I went to Montessori, I went to St. Dunstan's, I went to St. Mary's, I went to Country Day. And Country Day was a really hard adjustment for me in high school because I had left St. Mary's and having just some of the most incredible, dedicated, talented Black teachers. And I got to an environment where there was not one Black instructor. And I didn't know at the time how to articulate it. I was just very resentful and didn't feel like the school was nurturing my whole self. And I was in an environment where people didn't even think about things like that. And I think because of my experience prior to Country Day, I was in some ways tormented throughout 4 years of high school because I felt there was something unjust in what was happening, but didn't know how to say it and how to give it voice. And many years later, I'm not going to say many years later, when I fell into philanthropy, I realized that I was always a social justice warrior. And I think that one of my national partners once said that no one accidentally ends up in this work. Like, we are like moths to a flame. We find our ways. Those of us who are social justice warriors find our way to this work. And I got to the foundation not even understanding philanthropy, not understanding the interplay of money and power and race, And then sitting in a space where I was the second in command, the head of the foundation was a white man. And I would sit in meetings with him with donors and just kept feeling like, oh my God, is anybody in the Virgin Islands having these experiences where you either feel invisible or you feel constrained to speak because it's, it's the well-being of your organization or your community at stake if you speak up or push back against what you're hearing. And yet I sat through that for 12 of 18 years I've been at the foundation, just wanting to scream, but not wanting to in any way compromise the ability of the foundation to raise money. And when I stepped in to a leadership role at the foundation, I was still constrained. I was even more scared because I know we immediately lost donors. That was the first thing that happened. And so the issue of race was always in my face. It was not anything I could ever get away from. And as one of, I think, my 2 people of color in the field of philanthropy in a leadership role, I didn't have anyone to turn to guide me, to mentor me, to empower me to speak and to challenge the systems that I was bumping up against. So it's been an interesting journey that got me from birth to here, but there's incredible sort of alignment in what I experienced as a child and a young person, and then coming into this line of work that is. I don't think there are many places in the Virgin Islands where race shows up as much as it does in the field of philanthropy, race and power. And it's been an interesting journey to get here.
Indeed. And thank you, Deanna, for being vulnerable with us and for being genuine with us. We do have a few other questions, but I'd love to get to the final one because you've answered so many of the questions that we had. The final question that we had was around, what's needed for you to take your community to the next level of action? You've spoken, pretty broadly, but what's required for you to do that kind of work?
So what happened for me, first and foremost, was I think 1.5 years, 2 years into my tenure, so 2 things happened. I think Donald Trump ascended to power, which compelled me to begin a truth-seeking quest about what race meant in my life, and then also what race meant in my work. And so that happened concurrent with me meeting for the first time some really amazing, powerful Black women in philanthropy for the first time in all the years I had been in philanthropy. And those women were so wonderfully encouraging and empowering to me that they almost gave me permission to have voice in this work. And I feel like I was a different person and a different leader before I met them and then after I met them. And so much of where we are now and where we're headed as an organization, I think was informed by their leadership, their mentorship, their sponsorship, rallying around me. And one of the things I said, there's the part of me that's sort of a nonconformist from birth. And so I made a pledge to myself and my team that we would never be at the behest of donors who, for whatever reason, for punitive reasons or whatever, did not want to support our work or did not want to support our community. And that we would have to find other ways to encourage philanthropic activity in the Virgin Islands. And so those women have been incredible in opening doors for us and just continuing to help me grow my voice and empower me to continue this conversation about race and to do it confidently. And so when I think about the future of this work, it's all of us coming together. I've known Carolyn from I think the very beginning of my service at the foundation, and I've known the Women's Coalition. But what's really beautiful about the last several years is that the independent work we do is sort of aligning into sort of collective work and collective investments in our community, and that to me is one of the greatest assets we have is that we are all like in one way or another coming together, sharing a vision, sharing work, and empowering each other to make this community better, but not independent of each other, but as a collective and as a collaborative. And that to me is one of the imperatives that we have moving forward. Is that we have to work together, and we have to our logo at the foundation, we've had new board members that came on that wanted to change it. And it's just something that's so inspirational. It's people standing on the shoulders of people, standing on the shoulders of people. And that to me is how community change happens. So that to me is more of that is what I see us needing moving forward.
Incredible. Thank you, Deanna. And thank you for being such a strong partner in this work. And thank you for giving voice to the work that we're doing. Do you have any other thoughts before we pivot to Peter?
Yeah, I kind of want to just talk a little bit about, and there have been so many conversations that I've sat through over the last, several months that these sessions have been held, and heard, a lot of conversation about internalized racism. And I have to say, I've shared it with the committee that there was a part of me that was like insulted to my soul to have those conversations, because I felt like it's such an important part of our healing as a community to have those conversations, those really important conversations as people of color who have endured incredible generations of oppression. And the feeling that there's a part of that healing work that has to be done quietly and in private. And I think when I think of the Women's Coalition holding this work, I can't think of an organization that is better equipped to do it, because I think there's a part of it for those of us who see racial inequity in so much of the places that we work in. I know there are people that have the luxury to not experience it. I see it and experience it quite often. And there's a part of me that feels very protective of that healing, and that we have a lot of important work to do in sacred, quiet spaces as people of color. And at the same time, we obviously have to work as a community. But I think that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that our story is not very different from the story of our brothers and sisters on the mainland. And those women that came here were such an instrumental part of me sort of opening my eyes and understanding that this bubble that we live in at times here in the Virgin Islands is truly a bubble, and it deludes us from the reality of our story and the truth in our story. And I would love to give one example, and that was that Susan Batten, who's the CEO of the Association of Black Foundation Executives, was here, and she was giving a presentation. And in preparation for her presentation, she asked us to, provide her with some social and economic demographic information. We gave her a FEMA map of poverty pockets on the island, and she was looking at this map, and there's some, the places where our poverty levels were 50% or higher were represented by these really deep purple spots on the map. And she kept asking us, there was a number of us socially conscious, progressive people sitting in the room, and she was asking us, what's the story of these neighborhoods? And we were like, well, there's some low performing schools there, and we're sitting around and we're trying to figure out like what's the backstory for where poverty shows up in our community. And we couldn't get there. And she finally said, so talk to me about housing. And I was like, housing? Oh, well, yeah, like those are the neighborhoods where we have the largest pools of housing communities. And it was, so she's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how we look at poverty maps on the mainland, because there's such a huge short story of systemic racism around where Black people lived and how Black people lived. And it was so interesting that for whatever reason here in the Virgin Islands, that like we were disconnected from that reality. All of us sitting there that are doing this work, that consider ourselves activists. And so I think it's making those national, deepening those national partnerships so that we understand our story a little better. And then also just understanding our story better and doing our homework to really unpack and excavate how we got here. I think like one of the other things is what you're doing about racial equity. We became the new grantee for Kids Count. And one of the things that Annie Casey challenged us with is that we've got to talk about race It's something that for whatever reason we would have we'd have some demographic information about race, but it wouldn't be thread through all the other indicators that were represented in that data book. And they were like, you've got to talk about it. You've got your story is relevant, and it's important to this larger conversation of social justice on the mainland. And so that's one of the things that I think this forum is so important. And I'll do everything that we can do to support Women's Coalition to sustain this and continue this conversation. I think also just really being intentional and convicted in what our values are as an organization. I think I've sat in forums, in private sector forums, where someone who will be unnamed accused me and my nonprofit partners of being responsible for poverty in the territory because we continue to fight against economic development. And I don't think I've ever been more insulted in a meeting when he said that. And I wasn't even able to respond. The meeting broke as soon as he said that. But the fact that we fight for what we fight for, the fact that, when it comes to the refinery, that we would have a conversation about environmental justice because poor people don't get a voice should not be, represented, that we don't care about economic development. And so I think it's just being resolute in our virtues and our values when it comes to issues around race. And that we all have to stand up together with one voice to make sure that those who are voiceless have representation and advocacy, looking out for them. So those are just some of the things that I look forward to all of us as social impact organizations working together to deepen our investments and our commitment to how we embed this conversation in our work on a day-to-day basis.
Indeed, and that's the call to action. So Deanna James, we thank you, we celebrate you, we support you, and lift you up. All right, we're gonna get our tech ready to remove the spotlight right now and place it on Peter. We're gonna take it off of me, and then we're gonna put it on Peter so that he can speak to our very first question. And Peter, I think maybe when you start speaking, that's when the spotlight will come on you and you'll be in the center of our screens. Thank you, Dr. Chen, for that incredible technical note. Peter, we're gonna ask you to dive into the question of who are you?
Yeah, sorry, my picture is a little fuzzy, but I think the audio will come through fine. I think that's part of that's a question I'm trying to learn how to answer. So much about being white is being raised as an individual, you're part of a family, but you're not necessarily part of a culture specifically, at least not one that you're raised in to think of as a culture. It's just kind of the atmosphere. And so you're also not really kind of part of a history. So there's this whole industry of self-help books written primarily for white people to figure out how you identify yourself apart from the job that you have. Like when somebody says, who are you? You usually say, well, I'm a pastor, or I'm an attorney, or I'm a teacher. So any sense of self and culture and history is something I'm really trying to dive into and rediscover. And for me, that means Dutch and Reformed. It's a certain national identity and a particular Christian identity. And even saying that much, I mean, I grew up in a church where people would kind of throw out generically, if you're not Dutch, you're not much. But there wasn't anything specifically Dutch about them. We were pretty typical Americans, white Americans in that regard. And over time, there was less and less unique about being Reformed, and it kind of became a generic American evangelicalism. And so coming down here and realizing that a Dutch flag was kind of planted in the territory really kind of encouraged me to get back in touch with what it means to be Dutch and Reformed. And I think it really helped me see in a much more visceral way what it meant for Western Europeans to become white over a period of time, to kind of lose their ethnic, national, and religious identities and just start comparing themselves to the people that they were encountering that they had no understanding of. So they just said, well, those are the Indians and those are the Blacks, and they don't seem to think or act like we do. So there's definitely something wrong with them. So it looks like it's up to us to bring civilization to this new world that we've discovered. And that, oddly enough, growing up white, getting back in touch with my Dutch Reformed roots really helped me to understand what whiteness was and how whiteness was how whiteness was such a significant part of my thinking and what I thought it meant to be sort of a human being in the world. So who I am is Dutch and Reformed, and I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like and how I can be that in a more humane way, apart from kind of all the tragedies of what it means to be white.
Excellent, Peter. And if I can follow that up with another question, what are some of the experiences that led you to work in community healing, building, and social justice? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it was, I think the first thing that I hold on to really deeply is reading. I was going to be a teacher and reading books written by Jonathan Kozol, because I grew up in a family that was, I guess, a little bit left of center in terms of politics. So, you know, the idea of tolerance and welcoming all people was definitely a part of the worldview that I was raised with. But it was still like, you know, you're responsible for yourself and you need to be held accountable for your own decisions. There was still that sort of individualism that was part of my life that I had bought into. And then I remember reading these books by Jonathan Kozol, who was looking at the education system in New York. And he would talk about how just 2 train stops away from another, you would have some of the wealthiest education districts in the country and some of the poorest education districts in the country. And that was the first time it dawned on me, like, well, wait a minute, these kids didn't do anything to deserve that. They haven't even had a chance yet to make choices for which they should be held accountable. This is just something that they were born into, and that's absolutely not fair. And the more you spend time with that as a sort of concerned citizen, the more you realize that this has everything to do with race and everything to do with racism and the way that our country was founded and continues to be designed. And so then asking real human beings about that and getting to know people of color and seeing their humanity and really hearing their deep and very real pain around this, I think is what kind of carries me down this road still today.
And it's a significant road that you're on, called, qualified, and placed to do a thing. And this is a really meaningful thing. Let's maybe wrap up with a question around what resources would you say that you need that will help you move forward to liberation and action?
So when I look back over my life, this will bring me to coming to the table, which was mentioned in the bio. When I look back over my life, there are like specific practices that I think have helped me understand even what that question means and how I can begin to participate in that. And a big part of it, as I'm experiencing here, is uncovering history, like realizing that everything is not God's hand distributing blessings and curses to people. There is not an invisible hand of the market. People intentionally did what they did. And we're living in other people's imaginations and intentions today. And uncovering that history was a big part of that for me. And making connections with people, as I mentioned before, was a big part in kind of getting past the stereotypes. And the way that I think a big thing that struck me was the ways that I would limit people of color to arts and entertainment in what I thought they could bring to me. That they would be good dancers or good singers, or I could learn how to play sports better from them, but never thought about math or other areas of academics and expertise. I wouldn't go to them for. And so being in relationship with people helped me get past stereotypes and seeing the wisdom and understanding and a much deeper mutuality that was available for us. So that was an important piece of that. And then working toward healing, the operative word being work, rather than working toward career success, working toward wealth creation, working toward an early retirement, working toward healing is essential if we're going to see any kind of change. So learning about trauma, learning about moral injury, learning about cognitive dissonance, and wondering how those things kind of tear at us from the inside, and really making an intentional investment in healing, I think is essential to the change that we want to see. And then we have to take action. And I am so aware now of cultural appropriation and white saviorism and how those are easy answers for reconciliation and just trying to get us to get along apart from any real sacrifice and action. And so recognizing that there has to be systemic institutional change if we're going to experience an anti-racist future in the United States, in the Virgin Islands, whatever the case might be. And I'll just say, I think the biggest thing for me at this stage is to say that I'm starting to see how the language of racism and anti-racism is sort of clumsy because we're all led to believe we have a race. And I really do see now how the issue is white supremacy, that's what perpetuates the problems that we're still trying to overcome. And so it's on us as white people to figure out how we have internalized, even in less sinister ways, white supremacy, and how we can separate ourselves from that and try to chart a new course and create a sort of new world. And that's really, those things I mentioned are the pillars of coming to the table, which we're trying to build over at St. Croix Reformed Church.
Incredible. Thank you, Peter. Now, before we turn to the group for our group-wide conversation, Peter, were there any other thoughts that you wanted to share?
No, I think that's great. I think I covered it.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Now, for the 70 friends who are on the phone with us, we're going to try something we've never tried before. We're going to open up the entire floor to conversation. And if you take a look in your chat, I'm going to post the questions that we shared with our guests. And so as we open up this floor of Zoom to now 69 people, we welcome you to answer either of these questions. We'll offer this in order to really make time and space for everyone. I'll be keeping time. We'll ask that you take about 90 seconds to offer responses to any combination of the questions in your panel. And what we wanted to do was tonight, do something that we haven't done before. Open us up to a group-wide conversation that will help us identify the next phases for this important work. What we committed to was to host 4 webinars, and tonight's the 4th. All that's ahead of us will be determined tonight by how we sort of rest with these questions and where we settle with these questions. That'll help us kind of formulate some ideas for the coming months and years. And it'll also help us identify the appropriate leaders to help guide this work. So as you take a look in the chat, you'll see the questions. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, in order to keep, appropriate sequence of speakers and not have everybody talking all over each other, what I'll need you to do is to find my name, Allyson Reaves, and inbox me directly to let me know that you have something to say. And then I'll keep an eye on the sequence of the names that come in, and then I'll be able to call out your name so that you can speak to the other 69 friends on the call. So everyone, if you will, give you a moment to go ahead and take a look. And if you even want to just answer the question about who you are, this is the space for talking through that. So I see that Cynthia has inboxed me directly. So Cynthia, we'll ask you to take 90 seconds and give us your thoughts on any of the questions that we have listed. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, good evening. The question that I wanted to answer was, who am I? I think I'm unique in the sense that I consider myself an African born in the United States and not necessarily an African American. I'm unique in the sense that I am a Southerner. I was born in North Carolina, but I've lived here in St. Croix for the last 16 years. I am unique in the sense that as I said earlier, I self-identify as an African because I don't think the history of Blacks in America began when we got on slave ships. So as an enslaved people, we have to look back to our cultural identity as Africans. And I just want to put that out there that as an African born in the United States, I think that's the beginning of a lot of healing, especially in our community. Thank you.
Wow, Cynthia, you get the award. That's 47 seconds. Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. Let's see, I don't see that anyone's inboxed me yet, but I hope that you can all see. Oh, here we go. I see right on, so a thumbs up on that. Is there anyone else? We've got, a good amount of time that's reserved for group conversation so that everyone can have the floor, offer their thoughts and their reflections. We've got, I think, a few questions that are in our chat box. If you'd like to answer the question around, the perspectives and experiences that have led you to confront or defend against white supremacy in your life, feel free to take an attempt to, I want to caution myself around my words, take an attempt to answer that question. So I don't see anything in my inbox. We have a rather silent group tonight. Normally in our breakouts, we're all over each other. I see Sister Saida Carter, who is ready to answer a question. Saida, how are you?
I'm great, Allison. Just because of people's reticence, I'll jump in there. The resources that will help me move towards liberation and action are the arts. So I am a public school educator, but I've recently launched a online theater company that focuses on social justice. It's called Theater of the Oppressed Virgin Islands, Act Out Ensemble. And it's just been awesome. We had our first event. Some of the members are on this call. They were awesome. They really rocked it. And we're going to continue to open the conversation in the Virgin Islands about issues of injustice and not just wait for government officials to make change, show them the power and the intention of community change and community demanding what they want to see a better Virgin Islands. So just because people are quiet, I said that. So thank you.
Indeed, Sister Saida, thank you so much. I heard from Michael Fleming. Will Michael Fleming please let us know how you're doing and what you're thinking?
Yes, I'm doing well. As again, my name is Michael Fleming, born and raised Crucian. So I feel like one of the experiences that brought me to want to fight systemic racism is being culture shocked moving to America. When I moved to America during my collegiate careers, it showed me the perception that they had about African people in general. And also having a relationship and trying to build a camaraderie with people in America. Seeing that we had a cultural difference. They felt that we were different, but they didn't know that they were African at heart. So that made me delve into research and studies to really find out who I am and who, how we come into this place of not loving ourselves. So, and of course, working in different fields of study, working at the Ritz and seeing how the upper echelon or the people who control the large amounts of wealth in America treat people who actually have that same amount of wealth but have different skin color. So I realized that it has nothing to do with economic stability. It has more to do with their perception of reality. So that made me very, bring a zeal out in me to want to teach my people to love themselves and to give them knowledge and empower them. So that way we could really love ourselves, because that's where we really came from. Not loving ourselves completely. And yeah, so that is my little snippet. I love all my people.
It's very meaningful, brother. So thank you. Shalene Gums, tell us how you're doing and what you're thinking.
Hi, I'm doing well. The question that I wanted to tackle was what caused you to want to do community healing? I think working in social justice and in activism, you realize that a lot of what causes us to lose sight of who we are and what we do is the fact that we hurt a lot. Not only that, there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done in terms of the things that we've already believed, even in terms of culture and all the rest of it. We start to develop this mindset that doesn't belong to us. And so what has been the drive for me recently, is getting us to unlearn the things that we have learned in terms of what we are supposed to do into the things that we know that we should be doing. Getting people to realize that listening to your gut feeling and understand that when you feel uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, and that you should not just delve into it, because we've been so silent and we've been trained to be silent even within our culture, that unless we start to listen to ourselves and we start to move forward in terms of understanding that we do have a voice, but we've been caused to be silent, but we don't have to be silent, and recognizing our own strengths and our own uniqueness and our own experiences give us voice, gives us expertise, and it also gives us the bond that we need, because all of us together have a special part that can add to the thread that is going to help us to be free. But we have to recognize that within ourselves so that we're able to move. And in being able to move, then we'll be able to change a lot of things. We can't just continue to be, oh, that happens outside us, or this is going to happen. It's like we're all in a domestic violence cycle. You know, we have the honeymoon phase and then the tension building, and then we get quiet, which is supposed to be the explosion. And even when we go through, you know, physical changes and emotional hurt and we get hurt by each other, it just adds to us being silent. And it's to help us to unlearn our silence and to learn to speak, to learn to be free, to learn to want to have change, and to learn to accept that we don't need to live in the evil that we know, but we can live in the good that we don't.
Brilliantly spoken. I'd love for us to also maybe think about the specific question. I'm about to put it in the chat now. What are the resources needed to move us collectively to liberation and action? I'm going to put that in the chat right now. And if you'd like to speak to that, please inbox me. We can go ahead and move through some responses, because ultimately this is what these 4 conversations have been about, right? Creating sort of a glide path to help us get to a significant place in dismantling racism. And I see Felicia has responded in the chat around who she is. So thank you, Felicia, for sharing that. But for those who are able to kind of help us think out loud, you know, what do we need to move the territory to liberation and action? You know, is it a question of healing? Is it a question of funding resources to help us access, you know, maybe educational materials, resources, lectures, etc.? You know, do we need wide scale, you know, sort of racial transformation that's guided by, you know, specific leaders? I see that we have a lot of leaders on our call. I'd love to ask Dr. Chen to offer some insight.
Greetings, everyone. So I would start first with, it would be great if we learned how to breathe together, because that's something that we always do. Well, most of the time. And so if we just took a very deep breath together and hold it and navigate how we're able to keep that space of healing, engagement, so that we can utilize what we've referenced in other presentations around gentle, honest, open, specific talk, then exhale, then it would be a good place to start, like right now, right now. Most of us on this call that may appear silent are because we're usually the quote, rabble rousers, freedom fighting voices, activists, maverick to some, that not only speak truth to power, take action in the community and bring the rest of our community to the best of our ability with us, even if it seems like we're pulling a little harder than usual. It's not easy to have the discourse around what I refer to as terrorism. I don't call it supremacy. There's nothing supreme in racism. So I'm very specific when it comes to that because of the impact that it's had on Europeans to even sustain that, much less, quote, victims or entities that experience what is transpired as white supremacy. So I'm really suggesting that this would be a great time. Some of the solutions have already been shared. Utilizing the arts to be able to bring that voice and some solutions to the table, bringing some opportunities to have people in every part of government, every part of our civil society, every, the nonprofit groups, the grassroots organizations, the persons that seem like they dropped off the table, even those coming to the table, those that don't know there's a table. It would be ideal for us to develop some action-oriented items. Of course, funding is important. Of course, having resources are important. Our main resource, though, is every single one of us multiplied by 1,000,000. Check that out, because it's us that have to navigate this next level. So as I started, again, if we embrace the breath, then we can get to that navigation space of all the other elements so that we can take action right now and make it happen right now. Not just rant on the radio, not just talk, in between our personal conversations, but really engage in an act. So even if everybody puts down what they are willing to do, what is it? There's something that you do. Speak to people in your church, talk to the children, read a story. There's something everybody on this call is willing to do. And it would be ideal to be able to gather that data as well. What are you willing to do to literally undo these ramifications that we're experiencing that people refer to as racism, et cetera, and just keep the light. That way we can move it forward. Some say love, I say light, some say hugs, some say fight. However it works, make it happen.
We keep the light and we reflect the light from you, Dr. Chen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thanks.
We'll hear from Clemma, and thank you everybody for giving me your order. We'll now hear from Clemma.
So good evening, everyone. I think for us to move forward, we really need a commitment from the community. I mean, the Women's Coalition has taken us to these 4 major forums. We've done definitions. We kind of put out there what it is, but my concern is if we don't keep this going, is it going to stop tonight? So it's important for us to really dig deep and decide if we really want to make a change or we want to keep things as status quo. How do we do that? It's so many different ways. I heard a couple, but we can do things by educating ourselves first. That's one way. Start doing more education, kind of learn who we are, where we come from. We need to do more education with other groups, the business communities, the schools. We need to get more community people involved. We need to go out in the communities and see if we can strike up discussions that's going to make a difference. But it just can't be 1 or 2 people. It's going to take the community for us to move forward. So I'm really hoping that we get some people that's really going to be committed to move forward, because it's not going to change. It's that old saying is that if you don't stand up, speak out, and you don't say nothing, everything will stay the same. And we would have done these 4 forms for education piece for you and not went anywhere with it. So I'm really hoping that we really make it, and you can pick, you have a choice. You can decide if you want to go into schools, if you want to start your own groups. We're talking a lot about the racism piece, but the majority of the people on the call are people of color. So maybe they want to do some healing and some groups around prejudice, internalized racism. Why is it I don't like my sister because she live on the other island? I don't like when the people came here, how they treated me. It's a lot of that. So maybe we need to have more discussion in groups, smaller groups, about what our issues are so that we can move forward. So I'm just hoping that we get more takers, more commitment, and people kind of take time and digest what you would like to see yourself do as you move forward. Thank you.
Clemma, thank you. We'll now hear from Shanice, and then we'll hear from Joshua.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to thank Deanna first and foremost Like her, I also went to a private school in St. Croix, the God Hope School. So, you know, it was really astonishing to see someone like her, a person of color, a woman, in power in the Virgin Islands who has experienced something similar to what I have experienced as well. So thank you for sharing your story. It took me, I battled back and forth between speaking and not speaking because everyone that spoke before me kind of touched on a lot of things that I wanted to say. But I definitely think that as a Virgin Islands community, we need to be more involved in making sure that generations to come understand that they should love themselves. Not, I'm a Crucian, I'm a Tomian. You know, here locally, we need to understand that we're one people. You know, we cut our veins and we all bleed the same blood. So understanding that we have to have a love for ourselves is very important to me. I don't know exactly what would be a next step or how we can evolve the knowledge that we provide to the generations to come, but I know we need to do it. I know that it's something that can be done, it should be done, and I'm willing to be involved in it.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Thank you, Sister Shanice. I will now hear from Joshua.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Joshua Sundar, and I believe that there are several resources that we need for liberation and action. And I would first touch on like leadership, and we do need mainly motivation. I say motivation because having a vast outlook of the Virgin Islands community, we tend to not the look at the things that's going on the U.S. mainland and the things that's going on around us. We tend to focus on ourselves mainly, and we need to keep a eye out on the things that's happening around us because it actually has an effect on each and every one of us. Um, for example, like things like what happened on January 6th, you can ask a lot of Crucians around what happened, what occurred then, and they would have no idea or any sense of thinking about what went on, or they can't even tell you about what went on. So I believe that we need to be well informed and motivated. And as a Crucian myself, I have honestly not heard of groups or organizations that go against racism. But now that I'm seeing that the Women's Coalition has been going on since then, I am highly motivated now to take part in it, seeing that I have people of my very own kind. And I would have to agree with Mr. Peter when he said that we do need to uncover history. We need to learn about our past in order to get past the stereotypes that we see today. So I would like to leave by saying that we have a voice, but we need a greater voice, and that greater voice is all of us together. Thank you.
Very well shared, Joshua. Thank you. Thank you for standing up in this way. We do have a bit of a follow-up question that kind of relates to some of the comments that are happening in our thread. For those of you who do identify as activists or anti-racists, what are you doing now? And what do you need to do that work better? Would love some testimonials, 90 seconds if we can, around what you're doing now and how can, this community, our 66 friends on this line, how can we support you in that space? If you can, just do me a favor, send me a message to let me know that you'd like to speak to that. Again, the question is for those who are speaking, for those who identify as activists or anti-racists, what are you doing now and what do you need to support you? Mary Kavanaugh, please let us know what's on your mind. Can we see you and hear you okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it's Mary Kavanaugh Mingus. I just want to say as a white person that there are constant opportunities to confront the racism in our community, and they're constant. It's every day. I am in a situation where I hear something I absolutely can't believe. Just real quickly, I was in line yesterday at Seaside Market and they had a ball cap they were selling that said St. Croix discovered in 1493. And that really upset me. And I turned to a white man next to me and I said, look at this hat, sir. It says that St. Croix was discovered in 1493. And it was a white man. So he said, oh yes, well, I guess a lot of people haven't figured out yet that Columbus was a butcher. So right away, we were like these allies. He said, where I come from, he said, I'm just visiting, but where I come from, we call Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day. Anyway, that is the kind of situation that I feel like every day I have a chance to do some kind of confrontation, because it's for white people, it's everywhere and all the time. I brought a friend over to a friend's house. They needed someone to do some repair work. She looked at the man who totally speaks perfect English and she said to me, does he speak Spanish? And I said, well, he's standing right here. You can speak to him. You don't have to speak to me to speak to him. Anyway, it's every day, it's constant. The other thing that has me going, so for white people, we can just keep doing go out in the world any day, go anywhere and you will hear it because it's all there. The other thing I wanted to say was that I'm very concerned about the education system, because I am friendly with several teenagers who are seniors at Central High School who so far have missed school because of hurricanes, gas leaks, and pandemics. So they're going to graduate from high school in June, but I don't think they really got a high school education to speak of. We're in a community where there's nowhere to go if you don't have backup, because there's no real training programs. I don't know. I think the education piece for young people has got me right now going. And I also am working with 2- and 3-year-olds. I go into homes. Other kids are supposedly on their computers with this online school, but the online school thing is not working. The class had 22 children in it and only 10 were in attendance the day I was in this home. So the other 12 just didn't come online that day. So I'd like to do something about the educational system. I don't know if that's possible. I'd like to get all the white people off the Channel 2 news and weather. I'd like to have the EDC companies do some kind of vetting of who's getting the benefits, because I think we're all aware that the Cane Bay Partners are big deals in this community, EDC, and they make their money off the backs of the poorest people in the US through payday loans and they just entered Indian reservations. So there's a lot of work. I feel overwhelmed by all of it. And the US thing, we know that if the people who did the invasion were Black, that most of them would be dead today. So I feel that happy for the opportunity just to say my piece, and I'm willing to do any work that needs to be done. Thank you very much for listening to that rant.
It wasn't a rant, it was the truth. And Mary, thank you for sharing your truth with us. I see in my inbox a comment from Lisa, who is also working on this endeavor and an educational component with the Board of Elections. And thank you for sending that to me in my inbox. If you'd like to say anything to our friendship circle of 65 people, let me know privately so I'll know the order in which people would like to share their thoughts. So Lisa, did you want to share some thoughts? Lisa, we'll count you down from 3, 2, 1.
What, Lisa? Lisa or Elizabeth?
Lisa. I'm going kind of in order. So Lisa,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Elizabeth, we're coming to you in just a moment. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, very briefly. I don't want to monopolize this as I tend to do. Lawyers talk too much. But, you know, my concern is that we don't recognize our own worth. And I see this not only in what we're doing with respect to racism, but also in the 12 years that I've been working with the Board of Elections. We have no concept in this community about how important voting is. We have no understanding how voting can change things. We have no understanding as to how we can hold our elected leaders accountable. We do a lot of venting, but we don't take a lot of action. So I see a concerted effort, collective effort of people lobbying the legislature if necessary, getting out and using some great media person like Debbie to expose some of these issues and educating everybody in the process. Of course, our children, because these are the people who are going to carry this on. So I feel that education, as Mary said, is probably the biggest component, but education on all levels, and that would include many adults who have yet to understand who they are or their importance.
Indeed. Lisa, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you sort of uplifted this idea of, the political role in all of this. We all have three sectors. The first sector, which is your government, second sector, which is your private corporation sort of sector, and the third sector, which is your nonprofit sector. We can't do anything unless we have all three sectors very equally involved. And so that first sector of government is the most essential and critical to a lot of this work. I see a question from Elizabeth, and I think I saw you in the chat too, inboxing me to say a few thoughts. St. Thomas and St. John have definitely been included and invited in this work. So we look forward to hearing perspectives from there. Elizabeth, did you want to offer a few thoughts to our group?
Good evening. Sorry, I was late. Well, that was the question. You said on St. Thomas, St. John, and Water Island. Who is it involved here on these islands? Because I've been going around even to the different churches and stuff, and they say that that's on St. Croix, that's not on St. Thomas.
Okay, that's a wonderful question. So we'll ask anyone who's St. Thomas, St. John, or Water Island to let us know in the chat. We'll be more than happy to ask for your thoughts and your responses. But please know that this is indeed a territory-wide conversation, and we want to involve and welcome everyone. So if you are representing St. Thomas, St. John, or Water Island, please let us know in the chat. In the meantime, I see that Annette Scott has inboxed me, and she's talking about continuing education, prevention, policy changes, addressing generational, systemic, institutional racism, and prosecuting the offenders. Annette, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Prosecuting the offender.
Annette, can you hear us?
Okay. Oh, I had to unmute. Good evening, everybody. These sessions have been great. But as the discussions continue, we have to take action. And the action is to really bring those people to the table too. Those who have the ideology of nationalism and white supremacy and control, because racism is about control and money. And now we have a band of poor people getting on the bandwagon with racism because they want the power and control. And until we address that, racism is going to continue to grow. And bringing everyone to the table in small clusters or in policy changes and actually really prosecuting those offenders, because racism is a civil rights offense. When you want to harm somebody or keep them out of something due to the color of their skin, it's different with prejudice. When you don't like a person because of who they are or whatever, this is serious, and the action can only continue if we mobilize and take those actions together as a community. And also learning, educating people, because a lot of people say, I've never faced racism. Well, maybe you didn't acknowledge racism when someone told you can't get this loan because, the way that's subtle, say, no, you can't get this loan, or they take you to a property that they wouldn't even sell to their mother or to anybody except you because you're Black or a person of color. So the racism is real, is underlying, and a lot of people don't even recognize that you are a racist, especially there's keywords to racism. Those people, because you are who you are, or deal with it. And until we deal with it, we're going to be talking to the choir. It's like the choir is here in these sessions that we've had. These are the people who want the change, but not the people who are racist. You need to come to the table and say, why do you hate me? And when you're dealing with generational racism, it's just like with domestic violence, this is generational. That change has to come about. It's going to come about slowly, but it needs to come about sooner than later.
Indeed. And Annette, you've led us to our next question. What does the next level of action look like? And what is our role in it? So what we need are some real descriptors around what the next level of action is. This level has been community-wide conversations, right? We've had 4 of them. And so the next level, what does that look like to you, through your lens? And what is our role in it? I see that Michael Fleming has inboxed me. Michael, what are your thoughts? Be sure to unmute.
Yes, I think the next level in action is for us to aggregate our funds as well as our ideas, because I think one of the major roles in overt racism is that although we think that, yeah, we know about systemic racism, but what about the racism that we don't, that we're not really paying attention to, all the, the innuendos and the little subliminal messages that our children are getting, inputted and ingrained into their brain from watching television, not reading too much literature, and not congregating amongst people of their own, ethnic background or understanding. So I feel like the next level will be to yes, we need community action. And yes, it will be a beautiful thing to see everybody awoke and understand that we're going through the same plight. But for us to actually have a small group of, a think tank to sit down and create actionable, ideas that we can put forth that we can do in the same day. Like, for instance, just if it comes to reading a book and then we come in together and we put in that into motion, aggregating funds, letting people know that there are funds that are accessible to them so they can create their own organizations, and then we can pool those funds together, because right now one of the major components in systemic racism is for us not being, having the equity to do what we need to do to forward our advances, to be able to buy the stuff that we need in order to empower ourselves, in order to put ourselves in a place of power, essentially, because we feel like that power is in the hands of, the wealthy. But if we all aggregate our funds, like Dr. Chen said, we put our funds together, 1 million can continue to multiply. And then that bandwagon, initiative can continue to follow for generations to come, because we need to show our children, business etiquette, for them to understand how that you can pool funds and ideas together, and means more than money. But we need to actually allow them to see it. Even though we have different perspectives of our reality, if we can just sit down and have a camaraderie with one another, and once again, build funds, aggregate funds and wealth and ideas and put it into action. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It makes all the sense in the world, Michael. Resource development and infusing and accelerating resources to support our mission critical work. Yes, Michael, it makes sense, all the sense in the world. Let's hear from Deanna, and then we'll hear from Levon.
I just want to say that I think one of the things we have to do first and foremost is to just interrogate where systemic racism shows up here. I think we default to internalize racism because we haven't really done a deep dive around how systemic racism shows up here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of understanding of how the national federal government's policies, laws, how they show up in the community and how they impact Black and brown communities like ours. And so I think that's one of the things we talk about action. We have to do our homework. We have to really call a thing a thing. We've got to figure out where does it show up and how does it impact or prevent real growth and access to resources here in the territory. And then we've also got to we've got to bring policymakers to this conversation. And I think that, one of the reasons why we still struggle with this is because I can't think of a policymaker that was courageous enough to actually, and maybe one or two, that were courageous enough to call this out, to make this be part of a larger agenda. You think about what's happening nationally with all these major corporations and philanthropic entities that are, prioritizing racial equity and racial justice. And that conversation hasn't really taken root here. And so I think that, you know, one of the things that we have to do is to ensure that our policymakers are sitting at this table, make sure that the University of the Virgin Islands is sitting in this conversation and working at, like, you know, like Michael said, working together to find the solutions and find how policy should look in a community like ours. We have to you know, create new policies that serve us and serve our interests. I think of education. Mary, you talked about education as a priority, and I think of this whole conversation about equity, racial equity, social equity. And I sat in a convening nationally with huge a cohort of national philanthropic entities, billions of dollars sitting in the room, and they were talking about how to move this needle on education reform for poor Black and brown communities. And I remember someone from Finland was in the room, and he was just like, you know, you Americans are really interesting how you talk about equity. You know, equity is embedded in policy in Finland, where, you know, the least get the most. Like, it is legislative policy. And I sat and I thought about, like, in the US, educational funding is determined by property taxes. So it's like, it's informed, it is embedded in policy, inequity and injustice. And so how do we begin to really excavate and interrogate the systems that, like, operate here, and to understand how they impact our community, and how we can begin to you know, dismantle them. So that I think is another, like, next step, a really powerful next step that's rooted in data and understanding.
Indeed. Deanna, thank you. I really like that term around interrogating systems and imagining a new universe, right? Where equity is interpreted dramatically differently, and we're able to provide the most resources to those women, men, and children who need them the most. Lavon, let's hear from you, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I really appreciate this whole forum, the last, all the 4 forums, and I appreciate everything that everybody's contributed. And I really appreciate what Michael Fleming, Dr. Chin, Mary Mingus, and Deanna had to say, but I feel like action starts with us, with me, with you. You have to say action starts with me. And that starts with self-love and removing, eliminating the self-hatred and the colonialism and the internalized racism and all of that pain and anger from our past, and all the crap that's been laid on us, that you accepted stuff that's not your stuff, right? And so shedding the misinformation and the miseducation, and partnering like we are now. So it's me and you and us, and embracing self-love, and then just speaking out, right? So when you hear somebody say something, especially in the US Virgin Islands, you could say, no, that's not okay. You cannot say that. You may not behave that way. You cannot speak to me that way. That is not acceptable. This is unacceptable. At some point, we need to set boundaries for ourselves for what we will accept and what we won't accept. And then, of course, the piece that we keep hearing over and over and over again from the first minutes in the first forum until now is education, education, education. And what that piece looks like. And I think it needs to encompass all those things, because I'm still hearing pain. I'm still hearing, oh, somebody called me the N-word, or I heard somebody call the N-word and I felt some kind of way, and that disabled me instead of empowered me. And so if that's in your far past or if that's in your recent past, we need to take the steps for self-love and self-empowerment, and then group together to move forward so that we're not accepting this unacceptable behavior and this unacceptable labeling and disabling of our people, to move forward, to just speak out and say it's okay, because I guarantee you that in most spaces in the US Virgin Islands, if you're calling somebody out on their shit in Seaside Market or anywhere, somebody's gonna have your back. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Lavon, thank you for sharing that. And what you've just offered, and I see there might be a few messages coming to me, and Sam, I'll come to you just in one moment, but I do want to lift up something that Lavon just mentioned around healing and self-love. We've heard that throughout the evening. And so Sam, I'll come to you in just a second, but in the meantime, I'd like for everyone to think of, in the same way we've had 4 conversations about dismantling racism, what does the work around healing and self-love look like for the territory? Okay, that's the question we wanna really collect your insight around. What does healing and self-love look like for us? So I'll ask Sam to give some thoughts, and then I'm going to turn to Peter. Sam?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Sam. We can hear you, but we can't see you, but that's okay.
Okay. I guess starting with the last question, then kind of backtracking briefly if I can.
Sure.
I think love ties back into self-awareness, and that would have to do with honest education, because you can't love yourself if you don't know who you are. And I think the unfortunate thing that has happened is that as a people this side of the Atlantic,
Sam, can you hear us?
hear you.
Okay, perfect.
I can hear you.
Right, go ahead.
I think we don't know who we are, and it has to do a lot with a lack of education. And if we don't know who we are, we can't love who we are. I think that's the first thing. I think with that, we need to do honest education and comprehensive education, because there's a lot of revisionist history that is what we are learned or what we are taught. And we need to do away with that and just be honest. I think the next thing that we need to look at is, a lot of times we claim we want freedom fighters, but when those people step forward, we will literally sit back and watch them get slain, and nobody steps up. We need to get our organizational culture in order, where you can have something fact-based and nobody will listen, but if it's melee-based, people will listen. Where we like the hoopla more than the truth. And I think a lot of times because it's more exciting or entertaining, that's how you get the situation where it's easier to infuse
Sam,
the stories are salacious, so there'll be a relation towards the salacious.
Can you repeat that last thought? I think we might have lost you there.
I said there's, in the community, there tends, and it's not just Virgin Islands, Caribbean community on a whole, really, there is a gravitation towards the salacious. So a lot of times what we see is when anybody who can identify that, it's easy then to infuse negativity into the organizational culture that is our community. Because if you then do that, people will gravitate toward those salacious things, and it's easy to then create a situation where you have a scapegoat. And then when we scapegoat each other, the division due to colonialism. A lot of the things that we as Caribbean people blame each other for are actually a cause of colonialism and basically being the children of parents that don't get along. But because they pin us against each other, we fight with each other instead of fighting down the system. And then when you do have people that are willing to fight the system, they're labeled as troublemakers, or they're labeled as crazy, or there she goes again, and nobody wants to walk with the firebrand. It's cute to black power fist and say you are a freedom fighter, but when you have to pass through the fire of actually being that, few people are willing to walk behind the firebrand to actually do that kind of work. So I think we need to be honest about who we are, what we truly want, what are we willing to sacrifice to get the things that we say we want, and are we willing to do the work to do so? But it all starts with honest re-education of our people, because a lot of the stories being told are just either not comprehensive or they're just not true. Because a lot of the history is lost because the history only serves those that are in power and a certain image of a certain sector of people, and then everybody else's contributions are wiped to the wayside. And then when you don't know what everybody brings to the pot, it's easy to render people of having no value.
Thank you, Sam.
So I think we need to care and move forward.
Thank you, Sam. We'll make sure we ask for your information, because you had some incredible thoughts. Unfortunately, we couldn't hear them all clearly, but we'd love to continue engaging you in this work. So thank you for your contributions. We'll now hear from Peter.
So I want to just raise something that keeps getting put to me in the coursework that I'm doing. And for example, the latest one was to have a conversation about the line, free your mind and the rest will follow. And the question was, well, will it? Is that really true? And what we were being encouraged to consider was, especially in a white Western mindset, there is this stark separation between your kind of internal emotional needs and your exterior physical needs, and a stark separation between the individual and the environment in which they're being raised. So what was given to us over and over again is sometimes what gets deemed as immoral or abnormal is a perfectly normal response in an abnormal environment. And so what Frantz Fanon was always talking about was bread and land, bread and land, bread and land. And so I just want to caution, because I said before that healing was central and essential to making this happen. So I'm not denying or dismissing any of the calls to healing. I just don't want there to be such a stark divide between the work of healing and the work of just distribution of bread and land, because sometimes it's in the process of seeking those things that internal sense of identity and confidence begins to develop. And if all the work goes into kind of an internal sense of self, we might not ever get to the bread and land, but sometimes pursuing the bread and land restores that internal sense of self. So I'm not saying that that's 100% right, but I just want to lift up the balance between those two things as we think about how we become healthy people.
Indeed. Thank you, Peter. And what you said is quite true. You know, what's healing for some might be required education for others. You know, we all come to this with such individual experiences and journeys. And so while some might need healing, some might need education, and vice versa. For everyone who can hear me now, I'm going to ask you to, if you are willing to support the next level of this work, please place in the chat so everyone can see I am willing. What we'll do is we'll take inventory of our chat. We're going to save our chat. And as we put together some next steps, whether it's a task force or a think tank or a healing circle, for those of you who are able to write down, I am willing, you know, you're going to be the ones who get a call or an email or a text message to say, hey, we're ready to lift this up. So we've heard some incredible contributions tonight from both Peter and Deanna. I do want to leave some space for our planning committee to offer some thoughts as we close out this particular phase of work. So we've got Deborah, Lisa, Clemma, Carolyn, I see her on the line. We want to begin to sort of wrap up this phase and this fourth webinar. Again, yes, let's breathe. So I'll popcorn it over to Deborah, and then Carolyn, and then Lisa, and then Clemma. And we like to see the I am willings in this space. So let's see, Carolyn, would you like to offer some thoughts as we begin to close out?
So, of course, I'm just so grateful and so thankful to be part of this. And I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest with you. So what I wanted to just share with you was actually part of a poem from Audre Lorde. And a lot of you know who Audre Lorde was. She was an incredible warrior poet who actually is a founding mother of the Women's Coalition. And she is everything to me and to the Women's Coalition. And so this little piece I thought was quite appropriate for tonight and for all the work that we've been doing here. And this is from her poem, A Litany for Survival. This is the last paragraph. And it reads, "And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. And when the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." And that's all I have to say for tonight.
Thank you. That's all you have to say at 7:40 p.m. on February 11th, because we know you've got a lot more to say. We'll ask Deborah to offer a few thoughts, and then we'll turn to Lisa.
Thank you, Allyson. My heart is full. I am truly grateful that I am in this space, in this place at this time, and I feel safe enough to say something to all of you who have committed at this moment to this work. Thank you. It's in the spirit of gratitude and in the spirit of the courage and the support that you have given us that has made it possible for us to do what we've done. And actually, the work is yours, just as it's ours. So we're creating something new. We're putting amazing energy towards something that's going to change the Virgin Islands in ways that we can imagine and we should imagine. So I say gracias, I say merci beaucoup, I say thank you, I say blessings, and just like Levon said, let's just keep getting in that good trouble. Let's just keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. We lift you up and celebrate you. We'll now hear from Lisa, and then we'll turn to Clemma. Lisa, if you can hear us, you might want to take us off mute.
Hi, can folks hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, I am so enthusiastic, so re-energized, and so excited about what's coming after this, because there's much work left to be done, and the commitment that people have expressed, the honest conversations and frank conversations that I've been privy to in the breakout rooms, I have learned an immense amount, and I hope everyone else has as well. But what I know from the beginning is that activism is the only way. I mean, I was lucky enough to have a mother that you know, when she worked for the federal government, well, I don't know, this part is lucky, had to sit in a cage because Black women could not be part of the main secretarial pool. So she told me these stories. She took me to everything because she had to. And because she was a single mother before that was, you know, the norm, having kicked my father out the house because he wouldn't do what she wanted him to do. So she was a strong person, but she was also very mindful of the need for education, pushed me in ways and exposed me to things that opened my mind to change from very young. And I hope I've done that as well with my children. But what we need to do is to recognize that it's not just about our families. Our community is our family. So when I see how encouraging, you know, every time I saw somebody say I'm willing, I was almost ready to tear up. And now my daughter is trying to make me cry by saying, "You have, Mom." Thank you for that. But I mean, it's, you know, it is, as I've said previously, this talk will go on, it will be cyclical without action. So the idea that people are so willing to continue this work, I hope that we can get some concise and, you know, thoughtful and forceful things that we're going to do and be very specific about our goals. And I also think that many of the things that were addressed, education, healing, lobbying, even educating our leaders, can be done simultaneously. If we have enough people working, people can, you know, add their energy to things that they're most interested in, and we can come together collectively to take some action, and, you know, it will be a force to be recognized. And, you know, I see that is the biggest problem here. There's always been a lot of talk in the Virgin Islands, 100 talk shows, but very little action. I sat in the legislature for 15 years and saw very few groups, whether they be, and I'm not knocking anyone, but very few groups, and probably sometimes for fear of reprisals, like teachers who had issues, you know, people who had health issues. I saw very few members of the community come in and address their concerns to senators. And we have to empower people to do that. And because politicians are driven by getting back into office, they will hear us, you know. So if we work collectively, you know, I think there's no end to what we can do. And as Clemma said in the beginning, this is not the end, this is a new beginning. So thank you everyone for your participation. I am so pleased with how this has turned out, and so excited, as I said, for, you know, continuing this work until, you know, I pass out one day and then my daughter has to do it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your commitment to this work. We'll now hear from Clemma.
Yeah, let me sum it up. First, I want to just say to Deanne, when she spoke, it was very interesting, but I want her to know what she went through, I went through before her. This is almost 40 years doing this work. So that piece that she went through over at the foundation, it happened right here at the Women's Coalition. I'm sure it happens at some of the other nonprofits that's been around a long time, the whole racism piece and being a woman of color and being invisible. I certainly have experienced that, and sometimes still can experience that, even quote, considered the director of the Women's Coalition. I still have a little invisibility when it comes to certain sectors in the community, and that's why this work is so important to me. No one should ever have to feel that way or be put in that position. I think we have the ability to change history, create a new history, as James Baldwin say. We are history. We can make the difference for the people that's coming behind us. Right now, we're in the position to dismantle it. We got to change the culture, and we got to be very clear. We're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. And be ready. If you're going to do this work, you're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. You're going to make a lot of enemies. I can't count the friends I've lost over the years just speaking up. When you start speaking up and calling people out on that stuff, that is not happy. They do not like it, and it's a very uncomfortable position. But guess what? I don't think the Women's Coalition got where they were by being comfortable. So I think we are living legend at making people uncomfortable is why we're still standing 40 years later. I thank everybody that was on the call today. I thank everybody that spoke. I think it's so many opportunities and so many different things we can do. And I just want to say thank you so much for participating and being willing to move forward and be real clear. It's not going to be comfortable, but we don't want it to be comfortable, because if it was comfortable, we wouldn't get the job done. So thank you all for being a part of the process.
Excellent. And thank you, Clemma, for your vision in helping this all come together. I'll now offer a few thoughts and then we'll close out. Number one, everything in divine time and divine order. This is the time and we're establishing the order. Thank you for your commitment to this work. Number two, thank you for trusting me to hold space in this conversation. I appreciate your willingness to include me in how we've had conversations since November. Number three, for the other 54 of you who are on the phone, I see you. We see you. You are not invisible. In fact, you are called, qualified, and placed to do a thing. Thank you for choosing to do this work with us. Number four, and it's the last thing, we're going to take some space, the Women's Coalition, to think about some next steps based on what we've heard. We'll put together a few ideas, and for those of you who wrote "I am willing" in the chat box, we'll be placing some calls probably in a month or so. We do want to take some time to really digest everything that we've heard tonight and offer some ideas on what the next phase would be. So we appreciate you for giving the Women's Coalition that space to do that work. If you do have ideas, suggestions, or reflections, please do email us, call us, or come by for a visit. Thank you again for spending so much time with us. We hope you have a wonderful night, blessed weekend, and we will see you soon. Bye, everyone. Be safe. Take care of one another and yourselves.
Night, everybody. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Yes.
Good night, folks. Take care. Stay
Good
safe.
night. Thank you, everybody.
Blessings, everybody. Thank you.
Gracias, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Dr. Chen.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Miss Elizabeth. Thank you, Saida. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, iPhone.
Thanks, everyone.
You're gone. You're gone.
Thank you, Caroline.
Oh, everybody else is gone. That's why. Sweet Caroline. This time never been so sure. All right.